Thanks very much, and yeah, the certainly impression on me from starting to work on the Fitzroy River and talking to people up in the Kimberley, the real sacred nature of rivers it really comes through, and it really makes sense when you look at what rivers bring to the landscape and to people who live there. I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners, the Noongar people of the land and meet, and also to the traditional owners of the Fitzroy River. Many language groups along that river, and I sort of named them by the broad language groups, but there's a lot of names there. But to do it justice, so along the river there's Warora, Nikanamangala, Nukumba, Wamajari, Bunaba, Gidja and Willigan language groups, and various designations within that, and all those groups share a tradition of along that river. I forgot to tell you first about the emergency exits. So if anything goes seriously wrong tonight, we have to all be very orderly and go out of that door, or the door at the back, or that door. So you've got lots of choices. The only thing is you have to be very orderly about it. Okay. Now, before I go to our first speakers tonight, just like to make a few short remarks, just reminding or letting people know about some of the history around the Fitzroy River and its conservation. Many people some people would be aware in the 1990s there was a big battle. There was a plan to dam the Fitzroy River, and traditional owners and people of the Kimberley came together, and that was the formation of Environs Kimberley, who are still one of the Alliance members who we work with on this campaign to protect the river, formed to try and stop that, or to stop that dam, and they were successful in 1996 in ensuring that the dam that was planned for Diamond Gorge did not go ahead. But unfortunately, there was, the dam was stopped, but the river was not protected as a result of that. And again, probably even more recent memory of the state election when then opposition leader Colin Barnett, was a few elections ago, decided that it would be a good idea to build the canal from the Fitzroy River to Perth. People remember that one? Remember the announcement and the debate during the election, and couldn't quite believe it, as with many people. And I also remember a really a great action by the Wilderness Society where they took new, not used, toilets to the steps of Parliament House and sat on them and held the signs, "Don't flush the Fitzroy," and that definitely got the attention of the media at the time. But of course, we should note the history of caring for the river goes back a lot longer than these recent things, and in fact, many tens of thousands of years longer than we can really ever know. And the many tribes and nations who share the river, the traditional owners, have their own common law that's symbolised through rainbow serpent traditions and lots of other traditions that I can't speak to. But they do survive to modern times and are now actually recognised with the National Heritage listing. The National Heritage listing of the Fitzroy River. That was done in 2011, and there was no coincidence. It was the traditional owners of the river and the Kimberley Land Council who pushed really hard to make sure that the Fitzroy River was included in the West Kimberley National Heritage listing, and that their traditional values were recognised. And so it is recognised for the many language groups who express the same law of the rainbow serpent right through that river. And that it's worth noting that those cultural descriptions and the traditions, they're not just traditions in the sense of a sort of a religion or a spiritual tradition. They actually very well describe the way the river works, and it's a very complicated and complex hydrology, and the elders up there can tell you where the water goes and doesn't go, and it's quite amazing how those observations over many thousands of years accurately predict even deep underground water and where it's going to be and where it's going to go. It's truly, I suppose it's not amazing. I mean, people have been observing this river for thousands of years and surviving off it. And but it is a great thing about the river is those values. Even more recently, the threats to the river have once again come back, and through investment by the state and federal government's Northern Development Agenda, millions of dollars started to come into research into the water and soils of the Fitzroy Valley. And at the same time, the state government invested heavily in their so-called Water for Food program, and so lots of drilling and so on to find out where the water in the Fitzroy River is. Fortunately, people in the Kimberley aren't stupid and they've seen this before, and everyone knows what it means when all the researchers start coming and looking where the water in the soil is. And in 2016, the traditional owners from the river met in Fitzroy Crossing to discuss all this, and they came out with a document, the Fitzroy River Declaration. And that document raises concerns about the cumulative impacts of existing and proposed developments, and called for increased protection. And it highlighted, as Ben was talking about, the river is a living ancestral being in their culture and law, and that needs to be recognised in the way that the river is managed, and that is particularly also relates to those national heritage values. Following that, the Fitzroy River Declaration was very influential, and Josie Farrer, a member for the Kimberley, is also a Gidja traditional owner, took that to the Labor Party, and they took it to the election as part of their plan for the Kimberley, and of course won the election. And so now we have an election commitment for the protection of the river, which is a very exciting development. After all this history, we have a real opportunity now to make sure the river gets protected. And the plan for the Kimberley includes a new national park and also a management plan for the river, which is designed to protect the river, but also to do sustainable development, which is important. But of course, what does sustainable development mean? And I think that's the thing we need to be very vigilant about, is making sure that, and there are some very strong interests, as Ben rightly mentioned, Gina Reinhardt is one of them, and other very influential people who are looking to the water of the river for their pastoral activities. So we need to be really on it, and that's why I guess our campaign is working very hard to hold the government to account and make sure that they keep their promise to really protect the river. And finally, just 2 weeks ago, traditional owners have also recognised the same as what we are, that there is an opportunity and a risk in this election commitment. And I've been given permission to let you know that next week they will be releasing another statement, and it's going to be announcing Matawara, which is the common word for all the languages of the river for the river. There's many names, obviously, for the language groups, and Matawara is accepted as the language to the Matawara Fitzroy River Council, which would be a united voice of all the native title holders, traditional owners of the river, to speak together to those values of the river and to deal with this management plan and so on. And in the preamble to that statement, they say, we have a responsibility as a nation and globally to learn from the Australian Murray-Darling Basin story, and we can prevent a disaster in the Fitzroy River catchment, and the urgency is now. So I couldn't agree more. I think that sums it up pretty well. With that, I'd like to introduce some far more interesting guest speakers. We've got, as I mentioned earlier, Nicol Rangers, Nathan Green and Raymond Charles, or Greenie and Redmond, who are here. So I'll just say a couple of words about the Nicol Rangers and then invite you guys down to have a chat. So Nicol Rangers, they manage country extending from the tidal waters of King Sound, so from the beach right up into the Great Sandy Desert and through the lower reaches of the Fitzroy River. They're employed by their own Aboriginal corporation and work to plans developed with traditional owners managing the land. And they're charged with responsibility to manage the water through water health research and monitoring, biodiversity surveys, marine and freshwater fish tagging programs, weed management, feral animal and crocodile management. The cultural advisors and elders work with the rangers to teach them about traditional knowledge, and they learn from each other. And they use a combination of Western science and traditional knowledge to carry out conservation work. So what we're going to do is just have a bit of a chat. I'll do a little bit of a Q&A just to help the guys to share some of their stories with you guys. And then after that we'll go to Dr. Quiz and Adrian and Carissa to talk through some of the science work that's been done on Sawfish in the river.